Hello and welcome to episode 195 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly off-topic podcast. I'm Mike Sollosi, and today we're going to get a little negative and just let the hate out in this episode. We talk too positively, we have too much fun on Retro Encounter, so we're going to change all that for special episode 195. And joining me today is Peter Triezenberg.
Hi everybody, Peter. I am high drama at the Taco Bell Triezenberg.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hey there.
And Greg Delmage.
Hi, my name is Greg. I like old video games, except when I don't.
Exactly, Greg. Now...
Greg, you just summed up the internet.
That's a true story.
You summed up at least my presence on the internet, that's for damn sure. But anyway, today's episode is called Worst in Show. We decided that we are always talking about what we like about RPGs, what our favorite RPGs, and we're going to take the opposite tack this time. We're going to go over a handful of big RPG series that we know a lot about, and try to identify the worst game in each of those series. And this will sort of turn into a discussion of maybe what we dislike about these RPGs, discuss the bottom of the barrel for a couple big franchises. And so we each have a little personal list that we have this shared on this Google Doc. And I think we'll just go down the line one by one and try to figure out what is the worst of each of these. So I don't think there's really much else to introduce. Who wants to start? Peter, I choose you. What's the first series we're going to discuss?
Okay, I guess we might as well check Final Fantasy off the list.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like the good place to start.
Oldest RPG franchise, probably.
It's
arguably.
probably it's arguably the biggest JRPG franchise, and one that I am 100% certain all of us have played several games out of. So that's a good place as any to start. Peter, what do you think is the worst Final Fantasy game?
2.
Yeah, all right. So next game.
I'm there with you.
Final Fantasy 2 is one of those games where it's like, this is a very important step in the series' evolution. It brought about a bunch of franchise stables like Sid and Chocobos. It tried to experiment within the RPG genre at a very early stage in the series' history, which is commendable. It's also It's also an unplayable piece of garbage, and I don't know why anyone thinks it's fun.
Well, the thing that I think of with FF2 is I almost think of it as Saga Zero. It's the first. It's the first Kawazu game.
Zero.
It's the first Akitoshi Kawazu game. I don't know if he worked on a game before then. I think he did stuff on Final Fantasy 1, but this was sort of the game that he was in charge of, and it has a lot of hallmarks of the Saga series, like characters whose stats go up individually from certain actions, and a certain degree of nonlinear exploration that is, that Final Fantasy did less of going forward. Some Saga games already feel like they're not ready for a system like that, and Final Fantasy II was super not ready for a system like that.
Even by like Saga Frontier, he was still working out the kinks. So yeah, it doesn't work at all in Final Fantasy 2.
Yeah, I mean,
it was a little rough. For sure. Like, I've only played a bit of it, and I bounced right off it with like the password system, the way I loved the aspect of what he's trying to go through with building the skills through practical use, but it was functionally just not ready and kind of broken.
I mean, depending on your feelings on Kawazu games, are any of his games really ready for his systems? That's I don't think I've ever enjoyed one of his super well, other than Final Fantasy Legend 2 for the Game Boy, which is technically Saga 2.
I have Romancing Saga 2 on the Switch. I haven't touched it yet. I'm kind of afraid to. But
the three Romancing Saga games that I think were SNES are well regarded and are at least more popular than Final Fantasy 2 is. And the Saga Frontier games on the PS1 were also popular, but Final Fantasy II was just a really early incarnation of those ideas that did not work. And the story for FF2 isn't bad. It's probably better than Final Fantasy I's story, but
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, it introduces a lot of stuff that later games would jump off of. It's got a lot of good ideas and a lot of stuff that's staple of the series. You got your evil empires and rebel forces and airships and
very like medieval Star Wars.
Yeah, and best friends that betray you and then come back later. It's it has cool story ideas, and maybe a really, really fancy remake of 2, better than the GBA one, could do something, but it's not there. Especially, I tried playing the a bootleg version of the NES, a translated version of the NES ROM of this game a long time ago, and it was significantly rougher than the PS1 and GBA ports.
Yeah. The PSP and mobile ports, all the recent ports have definitely made strides to improve the game. The problem is again, I feel like the systems I play without radically changing things is still kind of broken.
Right, so we're basically in agreement here. Do we think there's any other contender for worst Final Fantasy game, or what do we think the second worst Final Fantasy game is?
I mean,
I'd throw out 13, and it's pretty divisive in a lot of ways. I know.
I don't hate 13. I know
you like it, Peter. Admit it.
Okay, I don't. Okay,
it's a weird one.
You know what? I liked 13 and its sequels, all for different reasons. In that, I think 13. I wrote an article for the site years ago going into 13's development and how it was basically put together from pieces in about 6 months.
That was in our Final Fantasy Anniversary series in December 2017.
Yeah, and they had all these great story ideas they wanted to do, but they had no idea what they wanted to do for gameplay and no real knowledge of the hardware they were working with because they were also trying to develop this proprietary engine until Square Enix was like, hey, we want to ship a demo with Advent Children's Blu-ray cut. Can you put something together? And they were like, And that's why 13 is just a linear series of corridors with combat encounters. That combat system is pretty fun.
Oh, yeah.
I would consider Final Fantasy 1 for that distinction of second worst Final Fantasy game, because it's we give it a pass for a lot of its very important ideas and for being first and for being an archaic NES game, but a lot of it really doesn't hold up, especially
still an archaic NES game.
Yeah, a lot of the encounter design really doesn't hold up, but it's I think it is more playable than FF2 and very important in a lot of obvious ways that we give it a pass, fairly or unfairly.
I mean, the transformations are enough to put it above Final Fantasy 2 for me.
Honestly,
the class change moment in FF1
so cool.
is cool and powerful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you feel real good when you get to that moment for sure. It's a very empowering shift in the entire dynamic of the game.
Yeah,
and the shift in power dynamic in FF2 is hitting yourself with swords so many times your HP goes from 750 to 770.
Can we at least all agree that the final dungeon gauntlet in 3 is the worst thing to ever happen to the series?
Yeah, from the underground labyrinth through the Crystal Tower, through Cloud of Darkness, or I should say World of Darkness, with no save points in between, is super rough. Oh man.
I still don't know how I beat that on DS. I must have had a lot of patience when I was younger.
I think it was the same for me. Yeah, I remember struggling so hard with that moment, and it was just brutal, and you just have to keep beating your head against the wall if you want to get by, and then eventually you do.
Those 3 dungeons are an alliance raid in Final Fantasy XIV. They're the level 50 alliance raid, and they're better than anything in the NES Final Fantasy games. So yeah, that's probably enough talking about Final Fantasy 2. We're basically in agreement it's the worst one, and there's a couple contenders for second worst.
I hear Caitlin yelling at us about Final Fantasy 15. Ain't you?
Oh, okay. Final Fantasy 15, RPG Fans Game of the Year.
There it is. 2016. Final Fantasy 15 is a good game, so.
I haven't played Final Fantasy 15 other than I think one demo, and that demo was already better than Final Fantasy 2.
Yes.
So
they're not in the same conversation.
Check out the Royal Edition. It's got all the DLC now.
But it's actually really fun.
Special shout out to 14 1.0, the game.
Sure.
Rebuilt.
The only Final Fantasy game that you can't play anywhere.
Okay, did you all see the interview clip with Yoshida where they were like, hey, are you going to do a 14 classic, WoW classic? And he was just like, nightmare.
Yeah,
that was terrible. What about Mystic Quest? Does it factor in for any of you?
Certain
amount of charm, and I
played it when I was 8 or 9, and I think it was perfect for me at that age. And the music alone is enough to distinguish it above.
It's
Final
definitely
Fantasy
baby's
2.
first Final Fantasy.
The boss music alone puts it ahead of FF1 and 2 for me. So I'm willing to say that game's better than. Yeah, it's inoffensive.
Yeah.
You can jump over things. That's neat.
Yeah. Final Fantasy
It's
two
really
was
satisfying chopping stuff down with the axe.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably the angriest I've ever been in the Final Fantasy was my friends trying to convince me FF8 was good when I was in the middle of my FF8 hate period in, say, I don't know, or the early 2000s. But I've basically come around. Final Fantasy 8 is not a bad game. I just hate the Squall-Renoa relationship and a few other character things in that game. But that's it doesn't begin in a discussion of the worst Final Fantasy games when 1 and 2 exist.
No.
But that's like the perfect mood to be in to play that game. Like everybody in that game is just angry and hates everything.
That's part of why I don't love it. But I still think FF8 is probably the least good FF game, numbered 4 through 10 at least. But that's we don't need to have a long discussion on
For
that.
sure. Yeah.
We I think there's even an item on the Retro Encounter Google Doc. Like Fenner versus Sollosi, is FF8 good or bad? But that's a lifetime ago in podcast terms. Can't believe I'm saying this, but that's enough Final Fantasy discussion for now. Do we have another series we want to volunteer for discussion?
We could move over to the other one, Dragon Quest.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's a clear answer. It's Dragon Quest 2.
Yep, it's also the second NES one.
Yeah, I mean, it does some things really well. It makes the world of Dragon Quest 1 much larger. Its story is slightly more, I don't know, it's slightly larger. And you have like 3 characters instead of 1. The problem is that 2 of the characters are basically worthless. The game never tells you where to go. It's an incredible grind fest throughout, and then you get to Roan, and it's like, whoa. It's an even worse grind fest.
Yeah, Peter, you were talking about the end game of Final Fantasy III being bad. Try 2 difficult dungeons, and then a gauntlet of either 5 or 6 boss fights in a row with no
it's 5.
Yeah, with no way to save in between any of those things. The cave is Road to Roan, and the castle is called Roan, and. Yeah. God, it is maybe my least favorite end game of any RPG I've finished.
Sure. I mean, you can feel that the development time was super short on that game. It was like 9 months or something from Dragon Quest 1 to Dragon Quest 2, and it's like they just decided to throw a ton of ideas on it, but like the level scaling alone, when you need like 20,000 XP to gain a level and you can only fight, I don't know, battles that give you 40 experience points, it's insane. I've played a lot of NES RPGs. It is the worst offender on that front.
Yeah, I never beat Dragon Quest II on the NES. I beat the Game Boy Color version years later, and I think I'd already beaten a couple other Dragon Quest games by that point. But you alluded to this a little bit at the beginning, Zach. Dragon Quest II, Dragon Quest I takes place on a single continent, and you have one character. Dragon Quest II, that continent is now just one continent in a larger world. And you have 3 playable characters who are all descendants of the. I think they're all cousins, basically cousins who are descendants of the original hero from Dragon Quest 1. And seeing the world and lore expand in that way is great. And some of the quest stuff is kind of cool, like the way that you make the flowing robe or water flying clothes, whatever you want to call it, like by like finding the thread and the tailor, and it's the best armor for Princess of Moonbrook in Dragon Quest II. Like, there's cool Dragon Quest things in this game, but it's so poorly balanced, and the end game is so busted that it's the worst Dragon Quest game. I'm confident in agreeing with you on that.
Yeah. I don't think there's any real competition. I mean, 1 is not super fun to play, but it's mercifully short.
Yeah, Dragon Quest 1 is like 5 hours long and is literally the first JRPG. So if we give FF1 a pass over 2, we super give Dragon Quest 1 a pass, and I'm happy to do that.
Right. I mean, somehow magically, I'm pretty sure Dragon Quest 2 is the first RPG I ever beat, and it's been like all downhill from there.
Wow.
It's interesting how they were able to, I guess in both cases, like when they iterated on their first installment, to take a step back somehow.
I mean, I think it's just ambition outstripping design.
Yeah, and the function, not the functionality, like the hardware just wasn't there for it.
I mean, because by Dragon Quest 3, I mean, it's arguably one of the 3 or 4 best. So they, took a little bit more time and figured out
Final Fantasy 3 on the.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 3 is, I think, meaningfully better than 1 and 2, and Dragon Quest 3 and 4 are meaningfully better than 1 and 2. So it's
leaps and bounds. Yeah,
it's I don't know if it's hardware limitations, because they were able to figure out the hardware for later installments. And we should also mention that Dragon Quest 1 and 2, I think they were released at the same time on MSX and some other consoles. So, or at least the first one was. So calling it just a NES game is a little misleading, but yeah, I don't really think there's another contender here. You can have quibbles about different parts of other Dragon Quest games. Again, like I said, we give Dragon Quest 1 justifiably a big pass, but I'm not even sure which one I would call second worst in this series. I mean, I think
probably
that
have to be 1, but I like all of the other ones. So
yeah.
6 is kind of rough in parts, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, I think 6 is a little boring for the mid-series games. Its gameplay ideas and design ideas are put at the head of 2 at least.
Yeah, it's fine. The DS version's a fine game if you're looking for a Dragon Quest. You can be worse.
I think Dragon Quest 9 is stretched a little thin and is sort of below average, especially if you play it solo. But again, nothing scratches Dragon Quest 2 in this.
None of the online stuff of 9 is out. It's a little empty.
Playing 9 now is rough because a lot of the online features are down, and I think that harms the lifespan of the game significantly.
And none of us have played 10, so it's doing well in Japan.
Yeah, it's been released on something like 4 different systems in Japan.
I don't like MMOs, but I would subscribe day 1. Which for sure.
Well, Dragon Quest X runs on the same Crystal Tools engine that 13 did. And
it does?
It does. I checked that out recently and was like, they finally got it working.
Well, the only MMO I like is Final Fantasy XIV, and if 10 was playable in some form in English legally, I would at least give it a 1-month shot. But alas, sure. I really can't judge it that way. And 11 is like my favorite video game of the past 5 years or something crazy.
11 is amazing, and I'm going to get it again on Switch because I'm a sheep.
I think I am too.
But the 16-bit stuff is enough to sell me off the bat.
Just replaying it in the 16-bit mode would make it feel like a new game. And Dragon Quest XI does not belong anywhere near a discussion of the worst Dragon Quest games.
No,
did you see the Treehouse footage where they had you can go to old locations from old Dragon Quest games?
That was in the 3DS version originally too. So I'm glad they're bringing that over.
They have Triezenberg Castle rendered in 16-bit. It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, nerd burst.
No, it's fine. We're talking Dragon Quest, and the discussion's allowed to wander a little bit. But I think we might be done with Dragon Quest because we're all pretty unanimous that Dragon Quest II is the worst one.
Yep.
It's bad.
All right, so Peter and Zach have already gone. So, Greg, what's one of the series on your list for worst in show?
Well, I think it's going over to another big fan favorite series, would be the Mana series out of, I guess, the Square Enix house now these days. I remember when they announced Children of Mana, because I had my DS, and I was just super stoked to have some Mana to play on it, and I went to the rental place that now is out of business, but they also sold stuff. And I went there in anticipation of the release date, being like, I'm going to pre-buy this game. I want to get it before even I think pre-buying was a thing, pre-sales and such. And they're just like, when it comes in, for sure, yada, yada. And I just kept going back week after week. And it was I think they didn't get their shipment in for a good 2 weeks for Children of Mana. And I was so excited to have it. And then I played it. And with all this buildup, it just turned into this really boring, repetitive dungeon crawl kind of roguelike-ish thing, and it was just not that fun, and I was super let down, partly because I did it myself with so much expectation.
Well, you're bearing the lead a little bit, because there was a Mana revival movement in the mid-2000s, with 3 games being released, I think, within the same year, or within the same 18 months. Children of Mana, Dawn of Mana, and Heroes of Mana. Yeah, I think all 3 of those are competitors for the worst Mana game, because I don't think any of them are good.
Yeah, they're definitely all up there, because the only other one from those 3 that I did play was Dawn of Mana, which again, I was so excited to have Mana in a 3D world. I was just picturing Secret of Mana, but being able to scope that camera around and take in these wonderful vistas of wandering around the countryside and fighting rabbites and being able to take in all the sights and sounds. And they kind of did that. They gave us a very lush, beautifully rendered world on the PlayStation 2, but as a level. They were just stages. and it lacked everything else that made the original Secret of Mana good. They just kind of stripped that out and made it into an action game more than anything, I find.
That game was so bizarre because, like, I'm still a little baffled because, like, Square's production on the PS2 that time was really pretty good, like, all things considered. And, like...
Yeah, because that came after Dragon Quest VIII and long after Final Fantasy X and 11. They should have been comfortable developing on the PS2 at that time. But was this I think their first time working in the Unreal Engine?
That I don't know.
Weren't they? They were really, really focused on the physics system in that game.
Yeah, they had that big combat gimmick of having the vine thing around his arm that turned into the sword, and you could latch it onto logs and stuff, and you could fling them on enemies.
I misspoke. It wasn't the Unreal Engine. It was the Havoc physics engine.
Okay.
But like they gave you a lot of weird stuff to do with your tree arm, and ultimately it was unsuccessful. I think that Dawn of Mana is the worst game in the series, in part because I think I had more expectations for it than Children of Mana or Heroes of Mana, which are both underwhelming DS games of different genres than pure RPG. Because Dawn of Mana is Seiken Densetsu 4. In Japanese, it was the SD4. Like Legend of Mana was called
Seiken. It wasn't a spin-off.
Yeah, Legend of Mana was called Seiken Densetsu Legend of Mana in Japan. but Dawn of Mana was supposed to be the flagship game for this Mana revival, and it was just awful. I did play Heroes of Mana and Children of Mana a little bit, and I didn't get super deep into either of them, but like they seemed like side gimmicks, and Dawn of Mana seemed like their attempt at making the next great Mana game. And as such, my expectations being higher, I have much more dislike for Dawn of Mana than the other two. But none of them are good.
And that makes sense. And it's just also you lacked a lot of the wonder of the whole radio manual system of having all these different spirits to call on. Like you could, I don't even know if you got access to all of them. And as it was, you had to level them up in each stage. And I think to a maximum of level 3, and you kind of got your max magic. But by the time the stage was over, you had to start from level 1 again and level all the way back up to be the most powerful for that stage. And breaking it down into these levels and completely humbling these creatures, it took so much out of the spirit of what the series was. And yeah, I'm there with you. The expectations were high, and it just, yeah, I would say it would definitely be, I'd say, the worst one over Children of Mana. Just Children of Mana was the one I jumped into first of the two, of that whole revival series.
Maybe this was the order they came out, but I think I also played Children of Mana first. I think it was Children, then Dawn, then Heroes for me, because I really wanted to like all of them, but they just weren't good.
I only played a little bit of Heroes. I got it on a rental from Microplay. That was the place. It was Microplay. I rented it from them when I first bought my DS. I rented that, I think, Revenant Wings, and a couple other things just to try some stuff out. I didn't mind it, and I kind of always meant to go back to it, and then I didn't, and then I started hearing enough bad feedback that it wasn't worth spending the money on, so I guess that is founded.
I heard it was a sequel or prequel to Seiken Densetsu 3, so I was really interested in Heroes of Mana. But it basically was just a bad RTS with mechanics that didn't really work in the SD3 world. Like the different kingdoms and nations fighting each other are the same kingdoms from Seiken Densetsu 3, but and I think it's a prequel, not a sequel. But I'd have to double check that. But yeah, I don't know.
4 had that too. Yeah, had some of the lore from 3.
I don't know whether I dislike Children or Heroes more, but that whole Mana revival was a little ill-advised, to say the least. And also,
wasn't Sword of Mana in there too?
No, Sword of Mana was significantly before that. It was a GBA game over several years before that revival. But Seiken Densetsu 1 or Final Fantasy Adventure has been remade a couple times. Sword of Mana on the DS, and then Adventure of Mana, I think, on mobile and Vita. And maybe also PC, and Secret of Mana also had let's say a not great remake from a couple years ago. So these Sword of Mana, Secret of Mana remakes might also belong in a discussion of the worst Mana games, because I don't think any of them were very well received. Right?
Yeah, it surprises me. I've enjoyed Sword of Mana. I don't know why it was so ill received. I didn't try the Adventures remaster.
I think Adventure of Mana was less well received. The guy that RPG Fan reviewed it, Nick, he liked it a lot, but it was also his first Mana game ever, so I wonder if that was influencing it.
I think Kotaku was pretty high on it too, weirdly.
I only played the beginning of it, but I thought that the Game Boy version was better than Adventures of Mana. But
which we now have.
Well, I mean, we had it before.
We always
also.
did, I guess, right? But we have it again.
Yeah, it's on the Collection of Mana re-release that was very recent, in fact. But yeah, I think that it's a three-way tie between Children of Mana, Dawn of Mana, and Heroes of Mana for the worst Mana title. Do we have any other dissenting opinions?
No, I think I got it, fam.
Yeah, I haven't tried the remasters enough, even though I've heard enough ill about them to stay away from the Secret of Mana remaster, but
you can get the good version of these games for $40 on Switch. Just do it.
Exactly. So I think you're right. That's those three. That's kind of a three-way tie for it. But Dawn might edge it out a bit.
Dawn would be my pick, but all three of those are not good, and I don't care enough about any of them to insist that it's Dawn, really.
It's bad.
Yeah, don't play those.
Did you ever end up beating any of them?
No. The one I probably played the most was Children of Mana, but I did not get close to beating any of them.
I did beat Children of Mana just through sheer stubbornness of I spent $35 on this. I will beat it, dang it, or whatever it was I spent. Heroes I couldn't, and I think I rented Dawn of Mana. I got to like the desert level, and it's like, you know what? F this, and I like straight up returned it. I was over it, which was so disappointing.
I returned all three of those games, and I rarely return things, so that gives you about how upset I was by those.
Oh dear.
This is a little off topic, but I want to ask, do you all remember the first game it was that you returned out of sheer disgust and disappointment?
I truly do not.
Yeah, no, I was way too young.
Mine was the first Ni no Kuni. I feel like I should put myself out there.
Oh dear.
Mine would have been probably a SNES game. Because I mostly rented my NES and SNES collection. But yeah. I don't remember strongly enough which I disliked enough. Actually, well, okay, now I remember. One of the worst games I've ever owned was a NES action game called Daydreaming Davy. That's just terrible.
Oh my gosh, I played that game.
Yeah.
It is terrible.
Yeah, I owned it, and I couldn't figure out how to beat a boss in the cowboy level, and I returned it about a month after getting it.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was
not good.
Yeah, that game's bad.
I was going to say, I now remember when we talked about this on another episode. I think it was Random or Retro. I can't remember which episode or which show it was on, but it was Sollosi apologetically because it was Disgaea. I wasn't disgusted with it. I just couldn't. It just wasn't for me, and I bounced off.
Well, you just have poor taste is the answer there.
Speaking of poor taste, don't we have something else on there that would be arguably in there?
We're also bad at transitions in this episode, I guess. Well, all right. I guess it's my turn, and I'll leave the Square Enix womb for a little bit and talk about one of my great RPG obsessions, Persona. And to people that have heard me on podcasts before, it will come as no surprise that Persona 1 is the worst Persona game, and it's not close.
I've never played 2 or 3, but I am certain that you are correct because I have played 1, and that game sucks.
Oh, 3 is so good.
I rented Persona 1 decades ago. It would have been the early 2000s. I think that game came out in 97 or 98 but in North America. Yeah. But I rented it in the early 2000s because a lot of people on websites like RP Gamer and RPG Fan really liked it. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is a weird occult Japanese RPG. Sure, that sounds great. And I hated it so much that I decided that Persona was bad for a long, long time. And until a friend of mine basically threw a copy of Persona 3 FES at my face. Again, over a decade later. Like Persona 2, both of them are dated and have some sort of clunky gameplay mechanics, not as clunky as Persona 1, and have some truly excellent character and story stuff in the Persona 2 duology. Persona 1 has none of that. It has a sort of neat non-linear gameplay arc where, depending on your decisions, different characters from your high school class leave or join you. And then there are 2 end game scenarios. One where a local businessman is sort of like dominates the story, and one where your high school homeroom teacher is about to be like possessed by a demon. So like there's the 2 story paths in the second half of the game, and that's a cool concept. But
isn't that second story path only in like the original game and the PSP version, the Western version?
They cut it out of the Western version, and the Western version of Persona 1 is real bad. They even change the race of one character that in something that's extremely uncomfortable to look at to look back at.
Blackface.
Yeah.
Did not miss you.
Yeah, JRPG blackface, never a good idea. But yeah, Persona 1's even throwing the bad localization out, it's by far the least interesting Persona game. It's mercifully short at around 15 to 20 hours, but I've never beaten it. I've only played the first 8 to 10 hours. And the PSP version is where I got the farthest in. But I genuinely love every other Persona game besides the first one. Even the dancing spin-offs, the fighting spin-offs, the Persona Q dungeon crawlers, which I genuinely like. Persona 1 is bad. Either read the manga or read a Wikipedia article instead.
I confess I have not persona'd anything.
Whoa.
They're good, but they are long and arduous.
Long.
So if you can't fit in 70 hours, then I understand. But I really like the other Persona games, and I've replayed 3, 4, and 5 multiple times each, which is just, I know, proves that I'm a maniac and doesn't really say anything else about me. But
Greg, you can trim your runtime in P3P down pretty easily because it's more of a visual novel. They cut a lot of the interactive segments. It's still a pretty faithful telling of that story. So it's a decent enough jumping in point.
Persona 3 Portable is not bad. I think I do value some of the visual fidelity of the PS2 versions of Persona 3 a lot.
Agree. I agree. We have yet to get a definitive version of 3, which makes me sad. It's so good.
Yeah, Golden really is a definitive version of 4. They only add and enhance that game. But FES and Persona 3 Portable both make different improvements to 3 and aren't really just slapping improvements on top. So, like you said, there is no real definitive version of Persona 3, and releasing a Persona 3 complete somewhere, I think, would be great, but it hasn't happened yet.
If they release Fez with a female female protagonist and allowing you to control your party,
and fast travel fast travel and character menus instead of having to talk to people in Tartarus to mess around with their equipment. If they made a version, if they made a Persona 3 that played like Persona 4 Golden, then it would solve every problem. But that has not happened yet.
I mean, it's kept me from playing it at this point because I always vacillate between do I play Fest, do I play P3P? I'm not sure, and so I just can't make a decision on
the solution. The solution is to beat each of them 2 or 3 times, as I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I genuinely love 3 and 4. I think 5 is super good. I think both Persona 2 games are dated, but very, very good for being what they are. I've played a lot of the Persona 4 arena fighting game. I love this series, but 1 is the sort of ugly first step that was, I guess, 1 died so the rest of the series could survive, I guess. Even the music isn't very good.
It's bad.
Yeah, so don't play Persona 1. Read a wiki article instead. I think we're ready to move on.
I think so.
My turn?
Yeah, go for it.
Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, okay. Well,
Mike.
Zach, your turn.
The Kingdom Hearts games went through a bit of a phase between 2 and 3 where they were coming out on every single platform. While
Between
they
2
were
and 3, isn't that 15 years?
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. That was
their awkward phase was 15 years.
In fairness, I think it's 14. Okay.
Kingdom Hearts is entirely
So still an entire middle school student between 2 and 3.
Yes.
Indeed.
They were coming out. Basically, they were releasing side stories and midquels and prequels and new games on every platform imaginable. So we had 2 on DS, 1 for PSP that was actually pretty great, 1 for 3DS, a bunch of mobile phone stuff. It was weird. And some of those games ended up being pretty beloved, but the 2 DS games are probably the weakest links. 358 over 2 days and Recoded. If I had to pick a series worst, I'm probably going to go with Recoded, mainly because Days is not fun to play, but the story is really good. If you're looking for it's probably one of the better parts of the Kingdom Hearts storyline. I take that with a grain of salt, if you will, but I enjoy it.
That and Birth by Sleep are the two best stories, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed. And the manga adaptation is great, too. So, you can solve the problem right there. Coded adds nothing of value to the story, like, even remotely.
That's the mobile spinoff?
It was a mobile game in Japan, and then they remade it for the DS, the original DS.
And that's recoded.
Recoded, indeed. All the remakes have as a prefix.
Yeah, the PS3 version of Kingdom Hearts 1 I played also had recoded on it, and when we were discussing Kingdom Hearts, you insisted I don't play it.
Yeah, I just skipped that one entirely, because they include the cutscenes from the DS games on the HD collections, which makes sense. I would have liked to have played a better version of Days, but it makes sense to, like, okay, we don't want to remake this whole game from the ground up, so we're going to give you the story segments. But Coded story is just utter absolute nonsense, and it adds nothing.
I mean, it's a Kingdom Hearts game?
Yes. It's the same nonsense of Kingdom Hearts, except only now it's affecting characters that, like, don't matter. Like, It's like, oh, we make a digital version of Sora, and digital Sora has to go into the worlds from the past Kingdom Hearts games and play a bunch of crappy mini games and heart, friendship, darkness, something. And I was willing at some point. I was like, okay, maybe this actually is going to tie into 3, and no, it doesn't. Now that 3 is out, we can officially close the book on that one and say Recoded is bad. Nobody should ever touch it.
I mean, I think it is the only Kingdom Hearts game out of the bajillion of them that came out that is not essential to actually fully understanding Kingdom Hearts 3. But for me, Chain of Memories is still worse. I hate the combat.
Are we counting Re-Chain of Memories in this? Because GBA Chain of Memories, I will give you. I like Re-Chain a lot.
I didn't play GBA, so I'm just talking about Re. It just the card system was overly convoluted. It was not, I thought, well put together. It was way too much time in menus, and there was weird difficulty spikes all over it.
I will give you that.
The story was better than a lot of other games, but man, I could not stand that combat system.
The only Kingdom Hearts game I've played is the first one, and but I will take your word for it on Chain of Memories and Recoded being worse. I have zero problems just taking your word on it.
Reed, I've said I like the combat system in Chain of Memories because I'm kind of I just like TCGs, so I'm kind of like, all right, this is
that.
This hits a certain micromanaging part of my brain and like deck building that I just like. But it is an important part of the story. So again, read the manga. The manga adaptation of Chain of Memories is 2 volumes and it's very good.
And there's just so many recycled assets in it too. I mean, I just felt like I was playing through Kingdom Hearts 1 again and like 2 more times.
The fact that it was essentially a pack-in bonus for Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix does kind of sweeten the pot a bit, at least in terms of how it was originally released.
Yeah, I can buy that. Yeah,
but as a standalone release,
So, Chain of Memories or Coded, depending on your preferences, is probably the worst Kingdom Hearts game.
And playing Days, again, watch the story, read the manga, because it is a good story, but playing...
That's the DS one?
That's the first DS one,
Right.
You play as Roxas when he was in the organization. It's got an interesting mission structure. The problem is you're trying to play a 3D action game with a D-pad on the Nintendo DS. What do you think the problem is?
Well, the problem is you're trying to play a Kingdom Hearts game.
That's the shade I came here for.
the darkness, if you will.
Hearts, Friendship, Darkness, Light. That is the... Yeah, that's every Kingdom Hearts game, I guess. But that's also a lot of JRPGs, so maybe I shouldn't take that tack if I'm trying to just throw shade on Kingdom Hearts. Again, I've only played the first one, and I did not love it. But my issues with it are, varying, not just story. But
I will say, in spite of everything else, it does get better, Mike.
That's what people keep telling me, and I did end up buying a copy of the Stories So Far edition. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and play Kingdom Hearts 2, or maybe Birth by Sleep eventually. I'm not sure which of those I'm gonna try first, but
I am going to 2 first.
Yeah, I'm willing to revisit Kingdom Hearts, but I do not think that revisitation is going to involve Chain of Memories or Coded.
Even if you're not into even if you don't care about the story at all, 2's combat is so fun. Yeah. Like, I think
huge improvement over 1. Huge improvement.
There's a reason people hold, even now that 3 is out, there's a reason people still hold 2 up as the gold standard for the series.
Yeah, people get real weird about Kingdom Hearts 2. I know that's for damn sure.
Can confirm.
That's definitely enough Kingdom Hearts discussion for a Retro Encounter episode. I thought this was over when I gave you a whole Kingdom Hearts 3 podcast, Peter and Zach.
and it ran for like more than 2 hours.
Apparently it wasn't enough.
Oh, I know. I edited that thing. But, Zach, what's the next series to discuss?
I think I'm going to go to probably my favorite series, Suikoden. And actually, for me, it is closer than it is for a lot of people, because I think sort of the standard answer for most people is Suikoden 4. And that is my answer. It sort of takes everything that's good about Suikoden and, like, strips it away. Because I feel like, Suikoden 1 and 2 in particular, they're fast-moving. They have a lot of really fascinating characters. It all, it mostly really works really well together, where Suikoden 4 puts you on a boat, and its sailing mechanics are worse than Wind Waker, which is saying something, the original Wind Waker. And
I've heard a lot of complaints about Suikoden 4 boats. But yeah. My perception of it is that everyone likes 1 and 2. 3 is more mixed, but people like it.
Yeah.
5, everyone was just so relieved that it was better than 4. And 4, everyone hates that boat, is my only understanding of the series.
That's pretty accurate. And actually, I don't like 3 as much as most people, and it gets back to the same problem that I have with 4, is that I think it just moves way too slowly. But 4 is not only moves slowly, but it's only 20 hours long, so it never gets going. So if you think back to like Suikoden 2, there are all those like amazing story plot points where they're like these huge twists, and all these people doing clever things, and that relationship between Joey and Ryu. There's really none of that. There's like some relationship between the main character in Suikoden 4 and a guy named Snow who sort of betrays you. But it just never gets off the ground, and it still has 108 characters, but that's basically like most of the runtime is you recruiting the characters. It's totally inessential. It takes place 150 years before the rest of the Suikoden series, so the lore element isn't as interesting. There aren't as many crossovers. It just didn't work nearly as well for me as the other ones do. But I still liked it, actually.
Is Luke in the game?
Luke? No, he's not. He's in 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, no Luke, then no dice. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no Luke. Luke is in 3. That's all I'll say about that. But yes,
I know about his involvement in 3, and he was one of my main party members in 2. So I enjoy me some Luke. And he was
throw a blue gate rune on him early on, and he wrecks.
Yeah, I finished 2, and I've played the beginning parts of 1 and 3, and thought they were all right, but they didn't maybe seize me the way 2 did. Yeah. But I don't know a lot about the later of the series. I know that Tactics isn't that well regarded, but everyone seemed to dislike 4 and complained about the boat a lot.
I mean, Tactics is it's actually a prequel and a sequel to 4, and so in some ways it actually makes 4 slightly better because it fills in some gaps in the storytelling, and I think it does a better job with the storytelling. The tactical element is really half-baked and bad, but the story is so much better than it is in 4 that it still like puts it above 4 for me.
Do we have a spot on this list for Tierkreis or whatever the DS one is?
I never finished it. It was okay. It was a DS game. I don't know. It was better than 4, but I never finished it. So I can't speak with any authority on that one.
I gotcha.
So it sounds like the best part about Suikoden 4 is that it was mercifully short, which is but also to its detriment. So,
yes.
Yeah, that's not a good look at all.
No, indeed.
Greg, have you played any Suikoden games?
I've been wanting to ever since I think it was the Suikoden 2 episode.
Oh, man.
It sounds rad and up my alley, and then I covered it a bit through Disdain Gaming, and it looks really neat, but I've never gotten into any of them. I think I rented, it might have been 3. That was on the PlayStation 2, right?
Yeah.
I rented that one when I think I first had a PlayStation 2 that my friend of mine loaned to me, and then I realized I didn't have a memory card, like an idiot, because I really hadn't gotten into next-gen gaming yet, so I had no concept of it. And so I realized I couldn't do anything with it, so I had to return the rental. And it wasn't until a while later when I could afford to buy a memory card and I just never got back to it. It's
two,
neat.
two is cheap on PSN, and I've put 22 hours into it over the last couple of days. So I don't know. I like it.
Is it PSN on the PlayStation 3 though, or on PS4?
Yeah. No, only on PSP, Vita, or PS3. Yeah.
See, I have PS4. I don't have a 3.
Yeah, I played it on Vita when we played it for the podcast around a little less than a year ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it probably helps to play Suikoden 1 first, because you can transfer save information over.
And they're so closely linked, the two stories. I kind of think of them as almost the same game in some ways.
Yeah, I didn't do that, and I still liked 2 a lot, but Alana was playing Suikoden 2 for the first time for the podcast, and she did link over a Suikoden 1 save, and she seemed to get a lot of it out of that. Like, it's a good idea to play 1 before 2, but it's not absolutely necessary, and neither of those belong in a discussion in the worst Suikoden game.
No, indeed. 4.
Yeah, got it.
Suikoden 4. It's bad.
I just want that as like a soundbite to throw into all my videos and stuff. Just Peter yelling, "It's bad" on everything.
It's gonna be there.
And it's fans of video content. I think that Max replays Suikoden 2 every other month for the on stream. So there's definitely archives of RPG fan people playing Suikoden 1 and 2 on our Twitch channel. But again, Suikoden 4, it's bad.
It's bad.
Greg, what's the next series you wanted to discuss?
On my list, I was kind of struggling afterwards to come up with some other stuff, and I thought we didn't give a lot of love to the Western RPGs. And I remembered the Fable series, and how I really did not like Fable 3.
Rest in peace.
I was barely aware of it being a series.
Right, and it's not like it's as long-lasting as all these ones are, but it is a pretty staple Western RPG series on this side of things. And 1 was great. It broke a lot of ground in what it tried to do and was overly ambitious and didn't quite set out to it, but it was still charming and fun to play.
Oh, so it's a Peter Molyneux game. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. And he definitely kept that running throughout the rest of the series. 2 is, in my opinion, the best of them all. And its only real issue I had was just this awful bloated menu, but the story was compelling. The growth was compelling with the characters, and what you could do was awesome. It was a really neat game and had a really great world. And then you get to Fable 3, where it looks better. Arguably, I think I liked the menu a lot better, how they did it, but it is really clunky still. So you have an actual physical place that is the menu. You load up the quote-unquote menu screen and you go to what's called the sanctuary, and it's a room that leads to other rooms, which are all, sub-menus. So it's not much better, but at least it runs a bit smoother, I found, than the clunky menu in 2. But aside from how much better it looked, it was just such a small, truncated game with really lousy story. It was also egregiously. It was also had the egregious DLC for all the cosmetic stuff, which I think the first 2 started that as well, of pay X amount of Xbox bucks and you can get yourself this armor set, which why couldn't you just buy that at the game with real money? I gotta understand one thing, if you spent real money to get these things and it had to be a lot, but and then you had access to getting it faster through just spending actual Xbox Live currency. But it's just weird that they had so much of that shoved in there. The co-op that they promised you in Fable 2 was kind of ham-fisted and really lazily thrown into 3 just to say it's there, hope you like it. And it was just a completely linear experience unlike the other one. So it was just a whole lot of junky, not followed through mechanics, and the game itself is just so short and just seemed like they just tried to shove it out the door in hopes of keeping it relevant, I guess.
I have a bit of an eye roll opinion towards Peter Molyneux in general. I was really, really excited for Black and White, the RTS strategy game he made for PC in the early 2000s, or maybe it was late 90s and I didn't play it until the early 2000s. I'd have to check information on that. And following my disappointment about that, and then reading about his reputation, made me sort of just think of him as someone who is always ambitious and always has good ideas, but also always over-promises and under-executes. So yeah, it was easy for me to sort of hand-wave the Fable series because I didn't own an Xbox or an Xbox 360 and heard similar things about them. Again, they were ambitious but didn't really fulfill their promise or premise. And again, my one friend who I know was really into Fable and kept trying to convince me to play them really liked Fable 2, and then I didn't hear a peep out of him about Fable 3. So I'm willing to take you on your word for the weaknesses of Fable 3, but also again it's a Molyneux game, so I'll always sort of assume it'll be disappointing, which is really, really rude of me. But yeah, that's my thoughts on him.
It's okay. I mean, Rob has David Cage. You have Peter Molyneux. You have your people who you know are just always going to fail you.
Yeah, I really wanted Black and White to be good. I was really excited about that thing because I played a lot of RTS and strategy games in the late '90s, early 2000s. Your Warcrafts and Ages of Empires and these are turn-based games but Civilization games. That was a genre I really, really loved, and Black and White I was so excited for it, and I'm not sure I've ever been more disappointed by a PC game. But
yeah, well, it had that godlike aspect too of even oh shoot, I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, the animal worship and sort of the gods interacting with the with the villagers and the advanced AI stuff going on. I thought it was going to be amazing.
Super Nintendo game. What am I thinking of? What's the game? You play your god, then you go into side-scrolling levels.
ActRaiser?
That's the one.
Yeah,
it had like a very ActRaiser kind of vibe all around it, and it's like, who doesn't want to have a giant wolf or a giant tiger? And then you got to unlock more of them, and they changed based on whether you're good or bad, and all that stuff. Like, yeah, there was so much promise going.
Yeah, I was really excited by it, but moving back to Fable, right. I'm not sure any of the Fable games ever sort of lived up to their ideas, and Fable 3 might have the worst execution on those ideas.
Absolutely true. Did either of you two get into Fable at all, or am I the only outlier Western player?
I had some friends who were into it, but it never piqued my interest because of all of the above reasons, all of the listed reasons.
I was never really much of an Xbox guy, so I didn't really get exposed to that series. And
you didn't get exposed to the Xbox.
I think I got an Xbox 360 simply because a friend sold it to me. And he had that on it already, so it's just like, well, it's an RPG. I'll play it, and the combat's kind of fun. Like, there's werewolves. It's got some neat aspects to it. You can get married. It's silly and fun. But the third one just did a lousy job with all of the. It basically seemed like it dumbed it all down and watered down so many of the concepts and made it far too simple.
Yeah. If I want to get married in the video game, I'll just replay Dragon Quest V again.
Hey.
Not a spoiler. Hand of the Heavenly Bride is right there in the title.
Deborah's still the right choice.
But, I don't know.
Is she,
like
though?
Peter.
She is.
Is she, though?
She's so much fun.
Yeah, it's true. There's 2 full retro episodes about Dragon Quest V. Again,
Dragon Quest V wives.
No, there's only 3 choices, so we'll see if you get really, really polygamous in the Dragon Quest XI remake. But that's a discussion for another day.
Dude.
As Peter said, Fable possibly, most likely, rest in peace. Did we ever get that adventure game that they had for like the Kinect or whatever that they teased at 1E3?
I don't think so.
No, the Kinect thing came out. It was
it did.
Fable one that got canceled, the Legends or whatever.
There was Fable rumors going into E3, but nothing materialized.
Yeah, like a Fable 4. That's right. But I don't know, people may not just trust giving him money anymore. Who knows?
Possibly. I don't know what Peter Molyneux is up to.
I love his ambition. I love it, but he needs to see it through.
I mean, there was also his that MMO and box clicking minigame that led into the MMO. That was maybe the ultimate Molyneux disappointment.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what that game was called.
Oh, I vaguely know what you're talking about, but I cannot think of it either.
Wasn't it Godus or something?
Yes, Godus. Godus was the final game. But I forget.
Yeah.
But there was even a name for the box thing leading up to Godus. But I don't remember it well enough to want to think about it anymore. So Fable 3, worst Fable game. We're in agreement.
Fable 3, it's bad.
Curiosity.
Curiosity. That was
click
it.
the box. That thing. It was a neat experiment.
Yeah,
Anyways.
Curiosity was the pre-experiment thing, and Godus was Godus, maybe Godus. I'm not sure. Was the MMO that ended up not really working out.
There we go.
So let's move on. It's my turn again. I want to talk about Ys, but I sort of am worried. Have any of you guys ever played an Ys game?
I played
No, sir.
Sollosi.
I'm still behind because I've been trying to catch up with other things.
Okay, so one person has played one East game. Great.
I liked what I played. Okay, I've played that, and I've played like a little bit of Origins, but not really enough to give a judgment call.
Well, you can do us all a favor and tell us which one we should definitely never play.
The first one.
I think I remember hearing you say that before.
Yeah, it's exactly like Persona 1. East 1 is an interesting historical document. It is an education. It is not a great video game. It does the old lawnmower or sumo wrestling style of East, where you damage enemies by walking into them. And depending on the angle at which you walk into them, you deal less or more damage and harm or don't self-harm. So, again, the best part about East 1 is that it's mercifully short at maybe 4 hours. But it's only really worth playing East 1 if you're curious about East history and you already own the 1 and 2 collection in some form. And so a few of the Japan-only East games, like Dawn of East, which is, I think, one version of East 4, keep that sort of sumo wrestling style of gameplay, but are just better. They give you more options and more spells and better story and a more involved story. I think East 2 is a good version of that weird old gameplay, but East 1 doesn't really hold up at all, and some boss fights are just maddening. 2 in particular. One around the middle of the game and one being the very final boss of East 1 are just so frustrating that I think the East series is great. I love a lot of them. Origin, which Peter mentioned, is one of the better ones. We talked about East of the Oath and Felghana, which is a remake of East 3 on this podcast a few months ago, and that one's one of the good ones. I really, really like East 7. East 8, the most recent one, is different from the other East games. It's like twice as long as any other East game and way more ambitious than any other East game, but it's pretty good. Maybe not a favorite, but pretty good. East 1 is the one to avoid unless you really want an East education, and it's the last one that on your list in your Steam library that you haven't played yet.
When I was younger, I feel like East Book 1 and 2 for the TurboGrafx 16 was one of those legendary games for a console that no one ever owned. And so it's interesting just to sort of hear you say it's not very good. Not that I don't believe you, obviously. It's interesting as to why that other people would have said it was good. I don't know.
It's those were remakes of the original of East 1 and 2. I'm not sure if it was TurboGrafx or MSX was the first way to play it. I think East 1 was 89, and that Book 1 and 2 remake was early 90s, 92 or 93.
I think the GrafX was where you played the remake. So
yeah, and the modern remakes for PC or PSP, which were early 2000s, are based on that TurboGrafx version. Because I know that... Oh shoot! Part of the final dungeon of East 1 was cut from the original version, but I think loaded back in the Book 1 and 2 version because it has a Yuzo Koshiro song that's my favorite East 1 or 2 song in the Book 1 and 2 version. East was always a niche series that was always sort of indie or hipster to enjoy it, even decades ago. And the first time I heard about it was in the context of, it's mostly Japan only. Oh, you probably haven't heard of it. Oh, the music's amazing. But if I unwisely decided to make my first East game, Wanderers from East, the terrible SNES version of the not very good East 3.
There's Zelda 2 of the series, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's very fair, especially since it's 2D action instead of a top-down action. But again. And that game is probably worse than East 1, but I sort of consider the definitive East 3 to be Oath and Felghana, which is great. So but in the modern context of East, where Falcom sort of is uniting the storyline and connecting it in a meaningful way, they've been East was made by multiple game companies and some really confusing things. There's I think 3 versions of East 4 that were all made by different groups, and not all of them were Falcom. But from the East 1 remakes in the 2000s onward, they have been sort of uniting the East story and trying to have it fit together in a sensible way from the East remakes in the 2000s onwards. And so that's what I sort of consider the real East timeline to be. And in that timeline, East 1 is the bad one. If you get into the old games, I mean, oh boy, there's the Ys 4 Mask of the Sun. There's the side-scrolling Ys 3 that nobody likes. Maybe the NES version of Ys 1, which isn't great. But in the modern context, I think Ys 1 is the worst one. And if you want to get into Ys, play one of the highly regarded ones. Play like Felghana or Origin or 7 or maybe even 8 or maybe even 9, which comes out in Japan later this year. Play 1 and 2 together, and only if you want to be educated on Ys and not because they're great games. 2 is way better than 1 though. So yeah.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
I think
Ys 1 is bad.
Yeah, 2 follows exactly after 1. At the end of Ys 1, you fall off a tower, and in the beginning of Ys 2, a girl finds an unconscious adult in her house. So
weirdly enough, speaking of Ys and things not being good enough to go into, wasn't there, like way back when, it's supposed to be like an animated feature or something based on Ys? Does anybody know anything about rumors of that way back when? I think it was supposed to be like a John Bluth film or something.
You mean Don Bluth, not John
Sorry,
Bluth.
Don Bluth, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, it was supposed to be a Don Bluth film or something.
I do not know anything about that. I know that Don Bluth was an extremely important animator. He did Land Before Time and An American Tale and
Yep.
I think Secret of Nim. He's
And Dragon's Lair and all that stuff too. Was
Oh
him.
yeah. He did the animated parts of the Dragon's
Space
Lair.
Age.
Dragon's Lair arcade game. That's true. That is true. And I think Anastasia was his last big movie before he basically had to retire.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of him doing an Ys game, an Ys movie. But he's a very important animator in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. Well, I had one of my mom's old boyfriends was an artist and animator, and at some point I inherited from him a binder that just had all these like spec drawings, like character designs and different angles and like frame by frame shots and stuff like that, all like kind of laid out this humongous like manifest. And on the side of it, I didn't understand for the longest time. I think until I started like listening to RPG Fan podcasts and talking to Derek, and it said Ys Bible on the side of it. And that kind of led me to like trying to search about it. And something about it, I found that there may have been an animation project, and this may have been like part of what this project was and had been canceled. And he maybe had worked on it at some point or not. Anyways, it's really weird. I was just curious if anybody else knew anything about it.
I have no earthly idea about it. And a cursory Google search is autocorrecting Ys to be US. So that's not very helpful.
It's a good sign. Yeah, I don't know what it was. It's mystified me for years. I think I finally purged it from my collection of stuff because I was holding on to it just to like if someone found Ys significant to them. But I have no idea.
You could be imagining it, but I don't know if that's I don't know anything about a Don Bluth Ys project.
Right? Yeah, it's the only thing I found in like some cursory Google search way back when, and nothing else that he may have been related. I have no idea. The timing of it would have been right.
Maybe you were right from the beginning, and it was someone named John Bluth working on an Ys
It's
animated
very
project.
true. His lesser-known younger brother who died, and no one knows because he never got to see his project fulfilled. Anyhow, sorry for digressing.
So, right, Ys 1, probably the worst Ys game. I haven't played all the Japan-only ones, so I don't know if Ys 5, Lost City of Kefin in the Sand, is any good or not. But let's move on a little bit. Peter, what's the third game on your list?
I put the Zelda series on my list.
Yes.
This is the thing.
Yeah, that lesser-known Ys mimic, Zelda.
Yeah, right? Totally rip off of Adol.
I can't believe how they completely ripped like Dark Cloud to make that game.
The thing about the mainline Zelda games is that there aren't really any bad ones. I mean, there are weak ones. We can argue semantics about 2D and 3D Zelda till the cows come home. Mm-hmm. But there's only one Zelda game, or two Zelda games, or three Zelda games that have basically deep sixed an entire console. And those are the Philips CDI trilogy.
Yes. Those do not count. They are not RPGs, and we are not discussing those here. Come on, man.
I can hear the mirth in your voice, though. I mean,
Zelda 2, the
Zelda 2.
Link, not a terrible game, but it is not a Zelda game.
I don't know. I think Zelda 2 isn't bad for what it was. It reminds me of Castlevania 2 in that it adds RPG elements that are mostly interesting, and even if the gameplay doesn't really live up to the games before or after, I don't think it's busted. I would be more inclined to target Spirit Tracks or
I was going to bring that up too.
or Four Swords Adventures if we're discussing the worst Zelda game. But I mean I don't have.
I like the DS ones quite a bit, honestly. I mean,
I don't have a lot of
problem.
I don't have a lot of love for Zelda 2. I definitely never finished it. I think I probably beat maybe the first 2 temples, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I finished it. It's real hard, but it actually it starts a lot of things. No, Zelda 2. Sorry. I feel like it feels Zelda to me. I mean, you're still getting heart containers and things like that. And sure, the leveling is different, but other than that, it certainly has its Zelda-ish elements.
Yeah, I confess I haven't given it the college try, but I have been wanting to.
I only rented Zelda 2, and again, I did not. I did found it very hard, and I did not get terribly far. But
I decided to torture myself with it again a couple months ago and just abuse save states, and that allowed me to get through it.
I feel like that's probably the only way I'd manage it these days too.
Yep.
I
think I'm with Sollosi on Spirit Tracks.
I think I have Zelda 2 on the NES Classic, so I'd maybe reach right there. But yeah, like Spirit Tracks was the one I found really disappointing because I love that style of Zelda game. I love the 2D handheld Zeldas and have beaten all of the other ones. And Phantom Hourglass I think has strengths and weaknesses. It's good. I don't want to throw shade on that one, but like Spirit Tracks was in the tradition of Phantom Hourglass, and it was probably built in the same engine, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
But
it looked great. It was Toon Link. He's back again. I like that guy.
The only really good Toon Link is Wind Waker Toon Link.
It's true.
But I mean, both the train stuff and the dungeon design and the world map design just was not great in Spirit Tracks.
Yeah, the trains, a fun gimmick. They were just a gimmick and made it really clunky to try and get around. And I thought it was neat, like the being able to interact with Zelda and having her kind of on the adventure for the first time, sort of. But the character design of like the Locomos and stuff like that just took me right out. I was just like, really? So a race of people called the Locomos? Like, get out of here, Nintendo. And that guy who's very obviously the bad guy, come on.
Yeah, at least they didn't take long to reveal that one.
No, true.
I liked partnering up with Zelda, and I like the dungeon design in Spirit Tracks broadly. I think it iterated on some of Phantom Hourglass's ideas in interesting ways, especially in terms of the Tower of Spirits versus the
Temple of the Ocean King. Oh god, I hate the Temple of the Ocean King.
Oh, that can die in a fire. But otherwise,
I enjoy both of the DS Zelda games. I think they're like the best 7 out of 10s I've ever played. Probably.
I think like Phantom Hourglass is. I think like Phantom Hourglass is flawed, and Spirit Tracks is worse than flawed. Yeah. But I don't know if that makes it worse than Zelda 2 or not, because I definitely played Spirit Tracks for more than Zelda 2.
Moving on to another Zelda game too. I enjoyed Skyward Sword a lot.
Oh right.
I'm right there with you, but it's
Skyward
divisive.
Sword. But Skyward Sword's control scheme will make or break that game for you.
I didn't mind it. I had no issue with it myself.
It started grating on me near the end. Around the same time, you have to start like backtracking a whole lot. Then it was like, okay, this game's spinning its wheels. But the final boss fight in that game makes up for just about everything. So
when we were discussing that game at some length during the Zelda episodes in April of 2018, I think Steph and Nathan were both talking about Skyward Sword, like saying, this is good and this is good, but then they would have to apologize for it. It was such a weird look. Like it's
probably the weakest 3D Zelda game.
The dungeons are good though.
The dungeons are great. Like the what is it? The Ancient Cistern.
Yeah.
Oh man, that dungeon is so cool.
Super fun. Yeah.
And that fight against the orb thing was such a pain, but also neat, where it like rolls down the ramp at you and stuff.
Yeah,
it just sticks out of my brain.
The one where you have to like shift the time on the like pirate ship.
Yeah, that was a neat dungeon for sure.
I like the painterly like art style. I think Breath of the Wild is a better version of it, but it's still a pretty good look for the game.
Yeah, the very it's like impressionist art. Yeah, made real. It was it's stunning as far as style goes. Like that thing, I don't think it could ever be put down for that, for sure.
Yeah, that Skyward Sword's a game I'd be willing to go back to at some point, whereas the DS ones, I'd be like, okay, I played them, I thought they were okay, I probably won't revisit them ever.
But yeah, it doesn't hang with Spirit Tracks or Zelda 2 for title of worst.
No.
Wanda Gamelon and the rest are just all out there in the ether, like, we happened for some reason.
No one wants to accept them.
Yeah, I truly do not think those count at a larger discussion of the Zelda games.
Well, excuse me, Sollosi.
And the animated series is about as canon as the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Hey, don't you go dissing the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, son.
Take one step from side to side.
I am going to cut this from the pod. So, yeah.
Zelda 2, Spirit Tracks, and Skyward Sword
are three very different flavors of Zelda that are all probably among the worst of Zelda.
Yeah.
But we're getting Breath of the Wild 2, ladies and gentlemen, and that makes me both very excited and very nervous.
I wonder what they're officially going to title that thing. Maybe it'll be Breath of the World, so we can confuse it just like everyone's confusing Outer Wilds and Outer Worlds.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding.
Trials of Mana, Trails of Cold Steel.
Yeah,
yes.
Good lord. I am going to misspeak Trails versus Trials for the entire summer. It is 100% happening.
Trails of Cold Mana.
Mm-hmm.
If I was able to spell Utaware Rumono correctly, y'all can figure this out.
Yeah, you poor bastards on the news site probably have had to do an update of those games a couple times a month, and yeah. You know, it's a bad sign when your computer has to learn those words.
I have so many auto-corrected JRPG titles in my history. You have no idea.
I have some idea, but definitely not to the level that you have. So okay, that's enough Zelda discussion for this phase of the podcast. Greg, what's your third game series to discuss?
Again, like, I know there's stuff out there. You know, Pokemon probably has a few bad children. There's likely something in the Trails stuff, but I haven't played enough of the JRPGs, and everything else is stuff we've already brought up. And now I was racking my brain. I know Mass Effect Andromeda is bad, but I haven't played it. But what I have done is played Fallout Tactics, and you know, Fallout has had a great history. Where it started off, people are up and down on 3, same with 4. We'll get into 76, but Fallout Tactics for me was probably one of the earliest ones that looks like 1 and 2, which are still kind of the golden age of that series, but was such a weird departure that it really didn't land very well. I remember I didn't mind it because I was super into stuff like XCOM, and it was basically that, just with Fallout flavor. But that's basically where it ended with as far as the Fallout stuff goes, so it kind of lost what was great about Fallout 1 and 2 of exploring this wasteland and just doing whatever you wanted, and in so many ways, having the world as your oyster, as much of it was available, and making these broad sweeping choices that had so much weight to them. And then when you get to Fallout Tactics, it's just this linear mission-based tactical RPG, and the tactical stuff was kind of neat. It was mostly well realized.
It's no Disgaea, that's for sure.
I mean, no, it's not. I didn't have to go into my semi-automatic machine gun and level it up by grinding through 100 floors of it. But that being said, it you could play it. Yeah, well, if you wanted to do it like RTS, or you could do it turn-based, so that felt a little more Fallout-y. And take it as you will, but like, I just had like some lousy like driving mechanics when you got this Jeep thing. Stuff didn't always work out with the how to aim and get your party kind of organized, especially if you were playing it in like real time. It got really difficult to try and click on the specific thing you wanted them to target, so it just kind of got really messy really quick if you weren't careful. I think I played it turn-based just because I liked having the opportunity to think it out. And that's the other thing, too, is there wasn't a lot of tactics to it, really. Like, once you had your tactic, it was pretty much that. Like, I seem to remember I had the doctor who was really good at doctoring and really good at shotguns, and my strategy was basically get him into people's faces by sneaking up on them, and then blew the crap out of them.
So it's Final Fantasy Tactics.
It's sort of, exactly. You know, once you have a strategy, you just kind of run with it, and just a different flavor. So I still had fun with it, but it wasn't Fallout. So while it wasn't a bad game, so to speak, it wasn't a great Fallout.
I don't know a lot about Fallout Tactics. The only ones I've played at length at all are 2 and 3, and I I liked both of them and didn't really finish either of them. But I'm a little bit amazed we are having a discussion of the worst Fallout game and not mentioning Fallout 76.
Oh, I'm here
It's
for
there, I
it.
just haven't played it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty universally reviled, and a big part of their E3 presentation on Fallout 76 was we're adding NPC characters,
Right.
which is, you mean there weren't NPC characters?
Yeah,
Right?
Todd Howard coming up and running interference on Fallout 76 made up a good chunk of Bethesda's E3 conference.
It was great though that he admitted it. So it was like we know what this is.
Because he basically admitted that they knew going in it was not finished and released it anyway.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, Fallout 76 leans into everything that was bad about Fallout and like excises everything that's good about it. So it like leans into the shooting mechanics. The shooting mechanics are real bad, and especially without VATS, it makes it a lot worse. No NPCs, no real storytelling, like a totally empty world. I spent 4 hours with Fallout 76, and that's 4 more hours than I ever wanted to spend with it. It didn't work at all. This is bugs aside. I mean, they're like even the bugs, even if you fix all the bugs, it's just hollow and empty and bad.
This is going to sound like a really weird comparison, but Fallout 76 versus the original Fallouts reminds me of comparing Game of Thrones to A Song of Ice and Fire. In that, like, just the absolute thematic mutilation of what the source material was actually about.
No social commentary anymore. Yeah.
After a certain point, you have diluted what the series was, and it's become a parody of itself. Like, in A Song of Ice and Fire, you take like these themes of like the horrors of war and how violence affects the common people, and you barely pay them any lip service. And then in Fallout 76, you take a series that was about like this bleak look at the emptiness of American culture in the face of nuclear annihilation, and you make a multiplayer shooter where you can nuke your friends.
Like, nuke the servers offline.
It is the opposite of what Fallout should be.
As a resident of the DC area, I was really interested to see how Fallout 3 would portray the DC area, and I played it a few years after it came out, and I was pretty impressed with it, and I was especially tickled that they took my literal hometown in Virginia and made it a cannibal town. But Fallout 76 doesn't even have any NPCs to populate a cannibal town.
Right.
So I mean,
who are they going to eat?
Yeah, maybe there's food in Fallout 76. I don't know enough about the game to comment on it.
A lot of survival elements, unfortunately.
Sure, yeah. So I know the common consensus basically, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So Fallout, if you want to get into Fallout, maybe don't play Tactics or 76. Play one of the ones that have a number besides 76.
Stick to the main line.
Or New Vegas.
Yeah.
Bugs and all, that one's apparently still very good.
Yeah, a lot of good writing in New Vegas. Fans of Obsidian are fans of New Vegas. And when people demo the Outer Worlds, most people compare it to New Vegas. Is at least the comparison I hear the most.
Obsidian was able to build their marketing campaign around, we made Fallout, the good ones.
Right.
And honestly, I have been impressed with what I've seen of the Outer Worlds. I play like a Western RPG once every 3 years, and I might make that one my.
It's looking neat.
I might play that one in 2020. We'll see. It's been at least 3 years since I got super deep into Dragon Age Inquisition.
It'll be Cyberpunk for me.
Well, that being said about Tactics, though, if you do want one of the Fallout games that you can play as a Deathclaw, that's the one.
There's a Deathclaw mount in Final Fantasy XIV. That's enough for me.
Is there?
There is, yeah. Deathclaws are those. There were monsters in Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI, and so they're Magitech enemies, and you can use one of them as a mount in 14.
Those things were horrifying in Final Fantasy VII with all their arms and stuff. Very different from the Fallout ones, that's for sure.
Okay, yeah, the Deathclaws in Fallout, those are like mutant insects or something, right?
Yeah, they're like giant raptor, bony looking, like if a bull and a raptor had very.
Oh, okay.
No,
I'm thinking of something else. I thought they were like praying mantises. I'm thinking of a different game. I think.
It's like a Balrog without any fire.
Oh wow! So Fallout is an adaptation of the Song of Roland. That's interesting.
In 15, Deathclaws are giant mechanical insects that shoot laser beams. So, winner by default, I guess.
Yeah, they're basically mechanical hands in 5 and 14. But if we're talking about Final Fantasy, then I think we're definitely done with our Fallout discussion. Fallout Fantasy Tactics. So that's a game I'd be more interested in. We're going to stay in the world of tactics-flavored things and talk about Fire Emblem. Peter, you and I were on a whole Fire Emblem episode a little less than a year ago.
Yeah.
And we discussed a lot of the series. This may surprise people. I don't think Fates is the worst Fire Emblem game.
Wasn't that supposed to be? That's the one I thought I wanted to jump in on until I heard it was awful.
There's a lot of people who love Fates. And
I do not love Fates, but I think that there is a recent Fire Emblem game that's worse than it. But I'm gonna be coy and dance around before I get there. I started playing Fire Emblem with the GBA game that came out in North America, which is Fire Emblem 7 or Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. Then I looked around and played some of the Japanese ones that I could find bootleg translations of, like Fire Emblem 4 and 6, which are Generations of the Holy War and Sword of Seals. Both of them I liked a lot. I tried playing some of the other older Japanese ones, but their translations were either incomplete or they were really, really clunky. But from the GBA onward, I would play basically every new one that came out, and the one that I thought was probably the worst one I've played is the DS one, Shadow Dragon. It's a little weird to explain. Explaining Fire Emblem takes paragraphs, but I'll do my best. Fire Emblem 3 was a SNES game, and the first half of Fire Emblem 3 is a remake of 1, and the second half is a continuation of the story from 1. So fast forward 15 years or so, and they come out with two Fire Emblem games on the DS. And those two DS Fire Emblem games are the first and second half of Fire Emblem 3. But we only got the first one in North America. That's Shadow Dragon. So Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon is the first half of Fire Emblem 3, which is basically a remake of Fire Emblem 1. So Martha's the main character. You get the 3 Pegasus sisters. You get Nabarl and Jagan and all those good people. But the thing that I thought was frustrating about Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon was, it has permadeath in it, like many Fire Emblem games do. Once a character dies, they're gone for good. But there's also the way I play Fire Emblem games is that I really, really try to have everyone survive and pull off tactics and strategies that if someone dies, I'll even restart the mission sometimes. Which is, I mean, maybe not the right way to play it, but is a way a lot of people play it. And in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, there are certain chapters and certain characters that you don't even meet unless you let characters die. And Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon sort of wants players to let characters die in order for the narrative to shape, and that is completely infuriating to me. Like, I don't want... I want to save my team and fight with as many people surviving as I can. And I have played Fire Emblem games where where characters die in a late chapter, but I keep pressing on because that's the best I'd ever done in that chapter before. That happened a couple times when I played a Japanese translation of the Fire Emblem 6, the one that stars Roy. I even still feel bad about one character dying from my first playthrough of that. But sort of watching your characters die to get more of the story when that isn't an option in any other Fire Emblem game is tanked Shadow Dragon for me. When I got several chapters in, probably around 10 chapters in, and then started reading guides, how do I do this, how do I do that, I was just searching for information on the game, and realizing that I had already missed some characters, and looking at how the death mechanic works in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, I just hated it. So I stopped playing and never looked back. I ended up giving that my copy of Shadow Dragon to a friend. So yeah, that's my pick. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon is the worst Fire Emblem game. I haven't played every single Fire Emblem game, so I'm sure listeners will disagree with me. There's probably some Shadow Dragon lovers out there, but as much as I disliked the tone of Fates and the exploitative nature of Fates, how it tried to recreate the parts of Awakening, but did so in such a ham-fisted way that it I think takes away from the game. There's things I dislike about Fates and some of the Japan-only ones, and I think that Sacred Stones is really underwhelming, especially since it's sandwiched by Fire Emblem 7 and Path of Radiance, which are my two favorite Fire Emblem games. Shadow Dragon's my pick.
Shadow Dragon also looks like complete butt, which even for a DS title, it is aesthetically pleasing.
How weird is it that the GBA games look better than the DS game?
Yeah, they went for this I don't know what art style they were going for, but it is uggo. Yeah, I didn't play much of Shadow Dragon. I played Sacred Stones. That was actually my first exposure to the Fire Emblem series because a friend of mine gave me his copy, and I thought it was a good. I didn't really have anything to compare it to at the time, so I thought it was pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's all right. It's I think it's a little bit of a letdown compared to the heights of the other GBA Fire Emblem games, and it's like it has fewer characters but more customization options, but I kind of love having a giant army of weirdos in Fire Emblem. So it I think that's maybe average or below average, but I don't know. I don't want to complain too much about Sacred Stones because I do genuinely like it.
I liked Awakening a lot, and then when Fates was coming out, I was really gung ho for it until like it came out, and then I was like, aside from just the pricing structure of that game being really kind of crappy, like you have to basically buy the game 3 times in order to get the whole story. The story was terrible.
I was so excited for Fates and very, very let down by it.
Like the story is terrible. No matter what, doesn't matter what side you pick. Like there's a correct third path that is like it's wretched, but it's like and the story makes no sense. The way they ham-fist in like the child mechanics from Awakening is just like, again, it's completely forced. Doesn't make any sense. The child mechanics in Generations of the Holy War and in Awakening are super satisfying, and made me want my entire army to hook up with each other. Like I was playing. I was like Emma Woodhouse. I was matchmaking so hardcore in those games. Now Jane Austen is probably not a reference you're expecting in this podcast, but but the the way they incorporate the children mechanic into Fates is so forced. It was like, oh yeah, we know that Awakening players love the matchmaking and love the children mechanic, so we're going to bring it back, except have it make no sense in context. Yeah, it's like I had like a bunch of child characters before I was even on like the 4th or 5th chapter of the main story, because like Birthright let you do some side battles and it would build my affinity.
It's so weird.
It just broke my immersion, you know? I was like, yeah, this is just dumb. Like, what am I doing here?
In Generations of the Holy War, you play as one generation in Part 1, and then as their children and some aged versions of Gen 1 characters in Gen 2. And that makes sense. And depending on how you pair the characters together in Gen 1, their children in Gen 2 will have different stats and properties and weapons.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. And then in Awakening, you have this Terminator
Time
thing,
travel.
yeah, where the children of characters that you hook up in Gen 1 come back from a dystopian future to try and change the past, which is kind of hilarious and kind of works. But in Fates, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, they knew that it was popular in Awakening, and they just create a hyperbolic time chamber, Dragon Ball Z style, where you can fast age babies that you make in the middle of the game.
Yeah, so that way they can join into your party.
Yes,
exactly.
It was a sensible story thing in Holy War, and then it was insane but kind of great in Awakening, and then it was just insane and not kind of great in Fates.
They doubled down on it too. There's like
they really do.
That's about the children.
If anything, they expand on the children's stuff in Fates.
And it's like, this is such a mistake. That's not even getting into how gross some of the touchy feely mechanics are. Like a lot of them cut from the English release, but like the fact that like, oh yeah, blow into the microphone to blow steam off your wife's face. And stuff like that is like, what is this doing here in this tactical strategy game? And
it's like, it's not like we think that they are incapable of making a good Fire Emblem game. Like Awakening was pretty recent. That's a 3DS game. And Gaiden, which is a remake of Fire Emblem 2. Echoes, which is a remake of Gaiden, which is the second Fire Emblem game. That game sort of is a bit of a return to the classic Fire Emblem style, and people really, really like Echoes.
And I'm really hopeful for Three Houses.
Three Houses comes out fairly soon, I think, but
end of July.
Yeah, but looks really promising, and so it's not like we think that they've lost the plot on Fire Emblem. It was just that Fates was so tonally and storytelling. From a tonal and storytelling perspective, it was so weird and uncomfortable. But again, I think that the ugliness and clunkiness and frustrating structure of Shadow Dragon, I think I dislike Shadow Dragon more than I dislike Fates.
Well, looking at Shadow Dragon as well, just with the ugliness of the map, it actually looks like it would be great for a free-to-download Dungeons & Dragons hosting game. Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, good. What a ringing endorsement.
Right? That's basically what I see looking at that. Also, Marth has great legs.
Mm-hmm.
Marth does have great legs.
Marth is handsome in every single edition of Fire Emblem.
But his legs on that Nintendo cover, though.
Fire Emblem 1 is extremely frustrating because Marth is maybe the worst character in the game. His
How do they make the hero the worst? What?
Because he can't class change, and his stats stop growing after a certain point. And Marth starts out as an okay character, and then by the end of the game, it's like you're playing chess, where the king is the weakest piece, and a lot of the strategy is protecting the king. Because if he dies, then it's game over. But I only played the first couple maps of Fire Emblem 1. The translation I found in the early mid-2000s was incomplete, to say the least, so I couldn't get very far. But yeah, Shadow Dragon is my worst pick for Fire Emblem, but we could go on and on about how disappointing Fates was. In fact, we have for multiple podcasts, haven't we, Peter?
Yeah, pretty much. It comes up time and time again.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about it. Okay, so that's enough Fire Emblem discussion. Zach, I accidentally skipped you a little while ago. What is your third choice for a game series to discuss?
Well, it's a pretty short series, and I think the answer is really easy. It's Mother, and the answer is Mother, because Mother 2 is amazing.
This is the
Earthbound,
easiest. This is the easiest choice in this entire episode.
It is because the other two are like masterpieces, and Mother 1 is not. Because what's interesting about it is that like it's still well written and it's still interesting. It just feels like someone took Earthbound and like ran it through a cheese grater, and took like everything that was good about the gameplay out of it and just left like the good writing and like really, really terrible gameplay. So like it's a total grind fest. And even if you grind like constantly in that game, you'll get one shot at it in the final dungeon. The game mechanics, the menus are really, really, really wonky in a way that almost makes me think that they're like trying to make fun of early Dragon Quest.
Yeah, Itoi was a Japanese essayist and copywriter. He was a known guy.
Yeah.
And when he came to Nintendo and wanted to make a game, they're like, absolutely, you're a celebrity writer. We would love for you to make a game. And so he had a lot of interesting ideas and creativity, and I think he probably did want to send up or parody video games or the RPG format in general with Mother 1. But the thing is, he wasn't ready to make a game. There are parts of Mother 1 are just busted, specifically thinking of a couple late game dungeons. The experience curve doesn't make any sense. The game is bad, and Earthbound and Mother 3 are both excellent. So this is the easiest choice in this whole episode.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Like I said, it's frustrating to play because it has so many good ideas and so much cleverness, and you can see the writing coming through. But man, it's not fun. There's like an easy patch, I think, that came out a few years ago, and I've been wanting to test that out because that might make it playable. But like even though there's no quality of life things, like even like getting like fast travel like comes very late in the game, and like you have to like travel to some place like really far away to get to it. It's insane.
Yeah, I stopped playing at the section of the game after Teddy joins in the mountain. And
I
was that's in the second half of the game, isn't it? Yeah.
Is it? I can't remember.
Yeah, Mount Itoi, right?
Yes, that's actually closer to the end now that I'm thinking about it. Okay,
I know. I don't know how close it is to the end, but it's definitely the second half. And and basically, I just kept dying in single encounters over and over. So I looked up how the hell do I get through this part of the game, and they said, and like the guide even said, oh, grinding won't really matter. You should run away from some battles. I'm like, what on earth? But
is a skill that allows you to run away from all the battles at some point. At that point, like you can spend like PP to do it.
Yes, there is a system of escaping from battles that you can exploit a little bit. I don't remember it well enough because this was over 10 years ago. I tried this, but Mother 1's not good. Like the Shigesato Itoi is clearly like very smart and imaginative, but they were not ready to make a game when they made Mother 1. It's not good.
Yeah.
Earthbound and Mother 3 can definitely be enjoyed without playing Mother 1, so don't try to play that for some feeling of needing to complete the series. But yeah, again, extremely obvious choice here. 2 great games and 1 bad game.
Yep, I agree.
Now, does it look that bad just because we've got Mother 2 first? and then going back, it's clunky by comparison.
I think that's
would be
a
easier on it the other way
possibility.
around?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a possibility. I mean, I certainly would have been more forgiving of it when it came out, I'm sure. But yeah, I think that you can see all like the interesting and engaging ideas in Earthbound, but like in a game that's actually fun to play.
Like, even if you compare Mother to its peers, which would be, I mean, for games you've already discussed in this episode, would be the Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games in the NES. Like, all of them are better than Mother 1. Like Mother 1 starts out sort of like a normal Dragon Quest clone and then becomes a broken Dragon Quest clone in the second half.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend it to people. Maybe if there's an easy mode patch, that would be better, because then you could see the cool story ideas in the second half of the game. But
Yeah.
I don't recommend this game. It's worse than Persona 1, which is a dark place indeed.
Bad.
Yeah, I have it to play it. Maybe I'll play it. No one's selling me on it.
Maybe don't play it. Maybe play literally any Ys or Persona game instead. Because you mentioned
even Ys 1?
Only so much like days in your life.
Mother 1 is probably my least favorite game of any one of the ones we've discussed in this episode. I really don't think it's good. But
I was gonna say, what's the worst? What the worst here?
Oh, worst of the worst. I would pick Mother 1. I think. But I haven't played the Fable, Fallout, Suikoden, or Kingdom Hearts games that we've discussed.
I've heard Recoded's pretty bad.
And honestly, you can, pretty much anything we talked about in this episode, you can just skip it.
Yep, I basically agree. Let's go through those games a little bit before we go into housekeeping. From Peter, we decided either Chain of Memories or Coded are the worst Kingdom Hearts games. Final Fantasy II is the worst Final Fantasy game, and either Zelda 2, Spirit Tracks, or Skyward Sword is the worst Zelda game. On Zach's selection, we decided Dragon Quest II is the worst Dragon Quest game, Suikoden 4 is the worst Suikoden game, and the original Mother is the worst Mother/Earthbound game. And on from Greg's selections, a huge three-way tie between Children, Heroes, and Dawn of Mana are the worst of the Mana games. Fable 3 is the worst Fable game, and Fallout Tactics is the worst Fallout game. And from the three series I discussed, Persona 1 is the worst Persona game, Ys 1 is the worst Ys game, and Shadow Dragon is the worst Fire Emblem game. I just hate the first games in each of my series. It's so weird.
Apparently, yeah.
I do not give any passes at all for being the originator. Unless it's Dragon Quest. I should say though, my favorite of my first of the three I picked, probably Ys 1. Like, it's only 4 hours, even though Dark Fact is one of my least favorite final bosses in my memory. Peter, of the least favorites in your three choices, what do you think is your favorite? What's the least bad of the bad?
I would never play Recoded again. I like Chain of Memories. Skyward Sword is probably the least bad, I would say.
All right, and Zach, what's the least bad of your bads?
I actually kind of like Suikoden 4, so I guess that one, yeah.
And Greg, least bad of the bad.
It's a toss-up between Fallout Tactics and Children of Mana. I mean, Fallout Tactics is a fun departure, and it's not terrible. And Children of Mana is just something different. It's just, yeah.
All right, well, that's definitely enough wallowing in negativity for one episode. Listeners, thanks so much for suffering through us for over 90 minutes. There will be a lot less suffering in the next few weeks of Retro Encounter. We have a special summer break episode coming later in July, and 2 episodes on Trials of Mana. One of my favorite games of all time recently had an official English language release, so I immediately changed Retro Encounter's plans to talk about it in some episodes.
It's really good.
Yeah, I love that game, and we haven't recorded the episodes yet, but I'm really excited to talk about it in the next couple episodes. And I think we can announce this now. Coming in August, we are going to have The Legend of Heroes, Trails of Cold Steel, our first Legend of Heroes discussion in over 3 years, since we did an episode on Trails in the Sky Second Chapter in 2015 or 2016. So it's going to be a lot of fun dipping our toes into the Falcom waters again for that. But those episodes are going to be 2 episodes coming in August. And listeners, if you want to reach out to the podcast, the best way to do so is email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on our message boards, visit Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, Twitch. All of those are linked from the main page, rpgfan.com, and we have something new every day. We also have 2 other fine podcasts, Random Encounter, which is hosted by you, Greg.
Yeah, that's me.
and Rhythm Encounter, which is hosted by to be determined. Rhythm Encounter is on hiatus, but there are plans to bring it back. I cannot say when or how or who, but we know. Listeners, we know.
We'll try.
But if you want to give feedback for any of our fine podcasts, you can review us on iTunes or however you are listening to us. Please do so. We love all the feedback that we can stand. So before we close out, let's reach out to listeners more directly. Peter, how can listeners reach out to you?
If you want to reach out to me, you can find me at I Have Fury on Twitter. You can also find me, Peter T, at rpgfan.com.
All right, Greg, your turn.
I'm pretty much at Greg Delmage, anywhere you can track me down, and I believe I'm G Delmage on our Discord.
And Zach, your turn.
You can email me at zachw@rpgfan.com, and you can also get me on Discord at zachw.
And listeners, if you want to reach out to me directly, I am at The Real Monsoon on Twitter most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times. That's a Persona 3 reference, Greg. And Monsoon Mike on Discord, and Monsoon on RPG Fans forums.
I feel like I need to watch the scene or something just so I can finally know what that means.
Evokers are a Persona 3 thing, and when you get meet a dog, you give him an Evoker for Dogs.
Oh.
Yep, that's it. Persona 3, not the worst Persona game, which we have mathematically determined earlier this episode. Listeners, thank you, good night, and good luck.